right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the BoomBastiCAST. Woo!
Woo!
We got the leaves turning orange. And aren't you glad you showed up for the BoomBastiCAST today, my friends? We have a superb guest with us this evening. Okay? All right? We got some good stuff going for you. The man behind The Hidden, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, Renegades, one of my favorite episodes of Tales from the Crypt. You know what I mean? Arachnid, that's good times. That's a good time. All right. The gentleman's been all over. He edited The Burning, for crying out loud, dude. Another hidden gem in the horror masterpiece world. Alone in the Dark, this gentleman's first film, epically iconic is a phrase they like to use. The cast on it is fucking bananas when you think about it. And it's just great, almost psychological horror, you know. But did I mention the man, the myth, the legend? Jack Sholder, ladies and gentlemen. Whoo! At the BoomBastiCAST, we love to sit down with directors that made some films that we really appreciate, influenced us. We just love, you know what I mean? Me and the Hawkman are both in the film world, as a lot of you out there listening may know. And the film world comes when you're influenced by other people that make good film. You know what I mean?
That is true.
Mr. Jack Sholder is one of those folks. So it's an absolute pleasure to have him on the show today. And we're gonna get a lot of questions in, hopefully to hear a lot of stories and you know, get a few things straight. You know what I mean? Have a happy day. So without Alexander, actually, what's your favorite Jack movie off the top?
Well, I think my favorite movie that he did was The Hidden. I really like that. I
Classic.
think that was a great film. I do have to say, throwing in as an honorable mention is Generation X. Now, that was a made-for-TV movie. I'm curious. I hope we get a chance to ask him about that. Because a lot of times when you have made-for-TV movies, they're really pilots for like a TV series that either they shoot the pilot, they decide, well, you know, we're not going to go this way, but since we got the pilot and we need an hour or 2 hours killed on a Saturday or Sunday night, let's put that in. Or it's specifically made as a TV movie. Now, this film is pretty much it's pretty much kind of an X-Man film. I mean, other than having one character that I know from the comics and another character which is definitely inspired by one of the characters from the comics, a lot of the other characters I don't recognize as like from the comics, which could be simply they didn't have the rights to it and they wanted to try their hand at trying to make a kind of a pseudo comic book type film.
Yeah.
I mean, it's based in it's not from my memory, it wasn't named the Professor X School for the Gifted or anything like that. But you have a lot of young, you know, talented, attractive young people brought together, go and battle this evil bad guy played by Matt Frewer, which you might know as Max Headroom from the classic MTV days.
Yes, and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
But yeah, I'm kind of curious about that.
Highway.
Yeah, because it came out in like 1996, and I believe in 1993, I think was when Corman did his Fantastic Four, which you know was buried because they decided they wanted to do a good big budget one.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think they only did that to like keep the rights or something like that. And then in 1998, they did the David Hasselhoff Agents of Shield, Nick Fury.
Don't
So
have for the half.
yeah, so I think it around that time was people were thinking about trying to adapt the the great world of comic books into TV and all that. Of course, in the 90s they didn't quite have the special effects that we have today. And
Yeah.
now, I mean, heck, superhero movies, comic book movies are like, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them coming out each year at least.
Yeah.
And TV shows. So it's kind of interesting. I hope we get a chance to ask him if that was one of the things they were trying to get a jump on, whether it succeeded or not. But it'd be interesting to look at it that way.
I support that, you know.
Yeah.
So with that being said, everybody kick your shoes up and get ready for a journey into some classic BoomBastiCAST materials here. I think this is our very first director that has been on the BoomBastiCAST show. We've interviewed directors at other shows and panels and such, but I think this is the first time, we've directed or rather interviewed filmmakers a little higher than our bracket, we'll say.
Yeah.
Made a little more of an impact than than some of the folks we run with, which is no shot at the folks we run with or us. But these are the people. It's cool. This is what I like about the show so much, is being able to sit down and talk and interview and get a vibe and discuss, things with people that made films that we are heavily inspired by and influenced by, you know what I mean? So with that being said, enjoy our interview with Jack Sholder.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, Jack, how you doing?
All right. So here we are.
Here we is.
Here we
Good
are.
to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you.
I'm Matt, and that is Alexander, my co-host over here.
Okay.
Hey.
We're from the Boston of Massachusetts area.
Yes. Which part of Boston?
I'm in Whitman, the South Shore, and he's more north up in Andover.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got Massachusetts covered. He's got the south side, I got the north side.
Yes. No one.
So you're a Southie?
Oh yeah. Well, we're close enough to be called South. We're like 20 minutes away from Southie, yeah, but we're Southie, yeah.
Yeah. I love Boston. Great city.
It's got a great vibe to it. It's one of those big cities, even though it's not quite LA or New York, but I think it's in the next rung.
Oh yeah. It's a fantastic, beautiful city. Great food, a lot of culture.
Yeah.
I always enjoy going up there.
I like it. We got our town, Charlestown, bank robbers, and all our Whitey Bulger, all our glorious history.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take a little rough history of it's always fun,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm in Asheville, North Carolina now, so
how do you like it over
different.
there?
Well, it's a little bit different than the Northeast. Living in the South, I've never really been here.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know about Boston, but New York. People say what's on their mind.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll tell you to fuck off. Pretty easily. I can imagine Boston is the same way. Down here, instead of saying fuck off, they get nicer, but they really mean fuck off. They have a saying here called "bless your heart."
Yes.
Which means like I feel sorry for you.
I like
yeah, he's a cripple, bless his heart, or he's an asshole, bless his heart. So anyway, but it's I live up in the mountains, so it's really beautiful.
How long are you living over there?
About 17 years, I think. It's kind of hard to believe. I mean, I've lived here longer than I lived in New York. I lived in New York for 15 years, and then I lived in LA for, I don't know, 20 some years. So it's hard to believe I've been living down here for that long. It took a little getting used to, and thing is, you can always get on a plane or get in your car and drive up to New York. My wife's family is from there. We have a lot of friends there, so we go up.
It's the hub.
So So shall we?
We shall gather. We shall get in. All right. Everybody ready? Okay. We already did a little introduction before here, before we brought you in. So you've already been introduced, and we usually start at, kind of the beginning of, the career, if you will. And I know that, you got a little start. You said, I've heard you say before, film school came in, and even really before courses were in colleges on film. So it was just kind of, how kind of without those things, how did you kind of get your start? I know we do films over here as well. And, we came up starting on the weekends with family and friends and stuff. Was it just kind of like that in the beginning, or a little more advanced?
Well, I mean, I sort of got into, I'm not one of these people who was, doing 8mm films when they were, 6 years old. Like Spielberg or a lot of people. I really sort of got interested in film, like toward the end of my college career. Before that, I thought I wanted to be a writer, and before that, a musician. So, but writing is telling stories, and I studied English literature, which was a good background, and music was a good background for film, because film is like music. It takes place in time, and most of the good editors I know and know about have some kind of musical background. So it works like music, both in the measure to measure sense, but also in the wider sense, like a song, a symphony, or whatever, has a structure.
Yeah.
It goes, it starts and it goes, and then, and it comes to a conclusion. And, even though music, at least classical music, for the most part is kind of abstract, it does tell a story, and it gets to you emotionally. And that's, that was always the appeal for me. So by the time I got interested in film, I had these other things going for me. I had a girlfriend who was really interested in film. We started watching a lot of movies, and I thought, hey, it'd be really cool to make movies, because I would watch these movies, and I would, like all of us who love movies, you walk out of the movie theater and you feel uplifted, or something. You feel different, better. And so I thought it would be good to be able to make other people feel that way for something that I did. So I just started doing it. I went to this place called Antioch College. It's a very liberal arts college, and they had a cooperative education program. So everybody, for half the year, they would take a job, and a few of them had some kind of film jobs. And I actually got a film job, sort of doing some very rudimentary editing work for an anthropologist, just basically kind of assembling film, but I kind of learned how to use the editing equipment and what happens in the film lab and all that kind of stuff. And there was another student who had spent a year at the London School of Film Technique, so he was my cameraman. And so, we just started doing stuff, and we didn't really know what we were doing, but we did it anyway. And it was a lot harder to do than now. I mean, now you can make a film on your iPhone,
right?
And also it doesn't cost anything; it's free.
Right.
I mean, we had to get 16mm film. To shoot sound, you had to rent a very expensive camera, and a expensive tape recorder that could sync up together. And then there were the lab costs. The 16mm goes through the camera 36 feet a minute. So, every minute, 36 feet of film, so you don't get to, just keep rolling. No, cut, stop, So, it was a different kind of thing. But you know, I started doing it and I learned it, and I made 4 short films while I was in college. I mean, some of them weren't that short. I mean, first one was 2 minutes, but the next one was like 15 minutes, and the next couple were, you know, over 20, like 20, 25 minutes long.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what I was doing at that point. Then I moved to New York, and I hooked up with an alum from my college, and I got a job doing editing for him. And so I kind of learned how to do it. Again, I was kind of self-taught, because usually the way that, if you want to become an editor or a cameraman or anything else, you would start as an apprentice, or, you know, camera, you'd start as a loader, you know, and you'd work with these people, and they kind of teach you stuff, and you'd just be around and you'd pick stuff up, and gradually you'd move up to assistant, and, you know, and then if you were lucky, you'd move up to editor or cameraman, operator, and, you know, but I just, I never worked with anybody that knew more than I did. You know, so I was just the editor, so I just kind of had to figure it out. But I kind of had this, I just had a real, like, instinct for editing. So I kind of knew when it was right. I didn't necessarily know how to get there right away, but I would cut it together, and I'd look at it and I'd say, and I'd fiddle around until it felt right, you know. So, you know, that's kind of how I learned, you know, and, you know, gradually I worked on some bigger stuff, and then I could hire an assistant, and usually the assistant technically knew more than I did, you know, gradually I sort of caught up, you know, and I kind of got pretty adept at it.
Yeah.
You know, I was watching, like, you know, this was in the early 70s or in the 70s, and, you know, there were like 6 Bible art houses in New York that would play old films, foreign films, you know, you know, they'd have a Hitchcock festival, they'd have a Buster Keaton festival, and I'd just go see everything that was playing. So, you know, I watched a lot of movies, and, you know, it just kind of gets into your bones. You know, it's kind of like, I don't think you go to school to be a rap artist, you know,
Right.
but if you want to be a rap artist, you're listening to, like, everybody's rapping.
Right.
And then you start copying people, and then you start to develop your own stuff. And, you know, it's not like you went to school for it. You learn, you know, that becomes your life. So,
Yeah.
And I was cutting trailers for New Line Cinema. And so, you know, I got to basically take a feature film and cut it down to 2.5 minutes. And so, you know, I learned a lot by, you know, it's basically like, you know, taking a grandfather clock apart and putting it together as a wristwatch.
Right.
So, you know, you learn a lot about clocks if you do that. So that was kind of,
Yeah, it's like cutting a short film out of a feature. Yeah. Making a short film.
Well,
out of
a very
feature
short
feature,
film.
Yeah.
A very short. Well, and also kind of saying, you know, what is it that's going to attract an audience? You know, that's another part of doing a trailer.
Yeah.
So, you know, because I didn't really want to be a horror film director, but you know, I did want people to see my films. You know, I didn't want to make films that people just showed, you know, in basements and stuff. You know,
Yeah.
I wanted to have films that people would go out and see. So, you know, I did have a sense of, you know, what played for audiences. So, you know, you could put a certain amount of that in there, you know, to please your audience. I mean, not to necessarily pander to them, but at least, you know, give them some stuff that they want. So, you know, so that was my background.
Now, you said New Line there. I believe Alone in the Dark, which is a masterpiece that was just re-released, I think, on Shout Factory, re-released it. I love that film. I hunted that film down
Scream
on
Factory.
Which one?
Scream Factory.
Scream Factory. All right, my apologies.
Yeah.
I've seen a beautiful. It's a beautiful addition with poster and the whole nine. Looks great. Anybody out there who hasn't seen it, definitely go check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Before that, you had a short called what was it? The last
The Garden Party.
Garden Party. There. Now that
It's actually on.
Yeah,
It's actually on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube, and it's completely different from all my other films. You know, it's a coming of age story about a young girl, just at the end of World War II, and nobody gets. Well, actually, there is a dead body in it, but it's not like it's not like a horror film. You know, it's sort of a young girl sort of learns what life is all about, but it's really good. I mean, it's the first film I did that I thought was really that I kind of moved into another territory. My other films were sort of more about me, whereas this was something that was, wasn't out of my personal experience, but that I was able to sort of take. It was based on a well-known short story by Catherine Mansfield, great early 20th century writer. Yeah. So so you were asking how that one came about?
It's got a great it's like a first short, kind of like a first real attempt at the short. It's got a great cast for it. How'd that come about with snagging up those people?
Well, I had a friend, had a group of friends, and they had a house up around Sugarbush in Vermont, and one of my friends started a bakery, and the bakery was pretty successful, and he wanted to make movies, and so he scraped together some money, and we made a very low budget short called Cats and Dogs. That I was actually going to put that up on YouTube as well, but sort of decided against it. It was basically like a story of the breakup between me and a girlfriend of mine, and it was very personal, but it was kind of flawed. But he wanted to do another one, and I had always wanted to make a film out of this short story called The Garden Party. So I wrote the script, and my friend, the baker, who is a very kind of entrepreneurial guy, met some people who wanted to get into the film business, who had a lot of money, and he talked them into investing. They gave us $25,000, which is a lot of money at that time for short. And his name is Paul Gurian, and eventually he moved to Hollywood, and he produced a film called Cutter's Way, I think, that's kind of a cult favorite, and worked, did very well as a producer. So we we managed to get Beatrice Straight, who was like a great Hollywood actress, a Broadway actress. Excuse me. She actually ended up winning an Academy Award for Network. She was in two scenes. There was like one little scene, and then there was one big scene where she's married to William Holden, and he's been cheating on her, and it's a scene where she really lets him have it, and she got an Academy Award for it. I mean, she's an amazing actress.
Great. Also in Poltergeist. And I've had I've been fortunate to have worked with a lot of really fantastic actors. I'm sure we'll get into that at some point. But so I don't know. We weren't really paying much money, but I guess she kind of liked the role. Person who played the young girl, who was the lead, was her name is Maya Danziger, and she had just played Juliet in the Shakespeare in the Park. So she or at the Public Theater, she was like really on the rise. But she just, I don't think that her she was that interested in her acting career. But she's wonderful. I had Mark Metcalf, who was in
had a big role in
Animal House.
Animal House. Thank you.
No.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I mean, we managed to get a really good cast for, you know, basically scale.
Yeah.
And you know, had a good, very talented director of photography. You know, he was the guy who was basically working as a gaffer, you know, but who was ready to move up, and this was like a chance for him to do his thing. But you know, I'd never worked with anybody of that caliber before, and so you know, I had a good crew, you know, and you know, a bunch of friends did other stuff. Producer's girlfriend did the costume; she did a great job. You know, stuff like that, and you know, it ended up. PBS picked it up and ran it as a special, and it won a bunch of awards. And you know, I think Bob Shay was impressed by it, you know, to the point where he would consider me to direct a movie for his company. Even though, I mean, we were best friends, so he knew me very well, and you know, he also knew that I was a really good editor. So
before we get into some more of the directorials, I wanted to quite, you know, you brought up editing real quick. Now, you edited The Burning, which is
right.
Underground masterpiece of horror filmmaking out there. How'd that come about? You get involved with that? It was, I think, the first Weinstein brothers film, kind of unofficial. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah. Well, not unofficial. Officially, that was their first film.
Yeah.
You
Without
know,
the Weinstein bro logo. Yeah.
Yeah. They were concert promoters. You know, they were based out of Buffalo. You know, I think both of them had gone to, you know, University of New York at Buffalo. Then they were kind of concert promoters, and they decided they want to make a feature film. So they basically they came up with an incredibly original idea for a horror film, which is a bunch of kids in a summer camp, and there's a maniac out in the woods who's trying to kill them. So, you know, no one had ever thought of that one before.
Yeah, so, Fisher Stevens, though. That was the kick. The kick.
Well, no, they had Fisher Stevens. They had
Jason Alexander.
Jason Alexander,
yes.
And they had who was the girl?
Holly Hunter.
Holly Hunter was in there. Yeah, she was in there. Yeah. Yeah, she was in there. And yeah, I mean, they had like this English director who I don't know why they hired him, but he's a really nice guy. He never directed a feature. He was very into what he called motor car racing.
Okay.
He liked to do motor car racing films, you know, Formula One stuff. And he had a very good director of photography that I think, you know, had a lot to do with it. And Tom Savini was a special effects guy. And basically, Harvey didn't treat, well, but neither of them treated Tony Maylam, the director, neither of them treated him with a lot of respect. That, you know, when there was a question, they'd look over to Savini, you know. And I edited it together, and you know, Tony said, "Oh, it looks pretty good," and Harvey said, "It's too short." And I said, "Well, okay, let me go through, you know, and make it, you know, see if I can make it longer." So I made it longer. We screened again. Harvey says, "It's too short. Still too short." I said, "Well, I used, you know, all the good stuff." He said, "Well, use everything." So I went back, you know, because they'd done a whole lot of different shots, but, you know, some of them it felt like it was more far away. So anyway, I took every usable thing and put it in. And basically, you know, what I learned was with suspense, the longer you drag it out, the better it is. You know, you don't want to get it over too quickly. So there's suspense and there's surprise, right? You know, Hitchcock, you know about what Hitchcock said that the difference is. But Hitchcock says surprise is two people having lunch. a bomb explodes under the table. That's surprise. Suspense, somebody puts a bomb under the table, two people sit down to have lunch. That's the difference. So I really learned about that, you know, and also like there's a gag where they the guy chops off, you know, somebody goes, you know, puts his hand out and he chops off his fingers. So Tom had made this thing, was like a foam hand. It basically looked like one of those stupid things people have in a football game. You know, it looked like a piece of shit. It didn't, you know, it wasn't like beautifully sculpted. It was a foam. It kind of generally resembled the hand, you know. And they just had a close up of the clippers, like clipping it. And when they clipped, the tips of the fingers just kind of flew off. And if you looked at it, it looked really bad. But if you cut it in, just like 5 frames.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my God. Yeah. It was 6 frames, not quite, but if 5 frames, it was like, oh my God. You know, and I like cut it in, and it's like, wow, this is really, you know, I mean, because you don't have time to like look and see it's made out of foam, you know, but it's, you know, it's the same color as the person's hand. And you just see the thing come in, and you know, and it's like, wow, that's kind of interesting how that all works. And I had actually seen this stuff because I'd edited trailers for like Sonny Chiba movies, you know, where they had all those kind of things where, you know, before they had all these CGI stuff and, you know, all this high tech stuff, you know, basically they take 3 or 4 shots and cut them together quickly, and it would look like something happened that never really happened. Yeah. So you know, I wrote Alone in the Dark. You know, New Line was a film distribution company. Their whole thing was, they started out because film was just starting to become popular in colleges. Yeah. You know, when I graduated from college, which is around the time that, you know, a little after that I was when I met Bob Shay. You know, there was like NYU and UCLA and USC, and you know, that was kind of it. You know, there was no such thing as film studies, and all of a sudden in the 70s that all started coming in, and so New Line was the idea to distribute films to colleges. You know, so they have to get the rights to films. They didn't have much money, and you know, they almost went out of business a half a dozen times, and then some movie would come along and save them. You know, they get Reefer Madness, or they get Sympathy for the Devil, or they get you know, something else would sort of come along and kind of save them. And at a certain point, you know, they managed to survive and grow. And then I used to hang out with Bob a lot. I mean, you know, we have dinner, you know, once or twice a week. You know, invite me over. Always never paid for anything. You know, he was sort of like a big brother to me, in both the good sense and the bad sense. You know, I went to see Friday the 13th with him. You know, and he was like knocked out. Like, wow, you know, they made this film for like, you know, 50 cents, and it's making a ton of money. And so, you know, we were all sitting around him and his sales guys after work, you know, passing around the joint. And one of the guys said that, you know, we should make a low budget horror film. You know, we know that market really, really well, you know, because they quote the youth market. And we should make a low budget horror movie, and we could make a lot of money. So I thought about it. I came up with this idea, which is basically Alone in the Dark. You know, a group of homicidal maniacs in a kind of an avant-garde mental institution with all electronic security, no bars. There's a blackout. They waltz out, and basically the whole world's going crazy, and they just blend in.
I had a question about that.
Yeah.
Was that based off of the Reagan administration? Because wasn't there a time during the Reagan administration when they shut down a lot of mental hospitals and a lot of patients went into the streets?
Well, that wasn't really what I was. That wasn't really what I was.
I know that they broke out. Yeah.
there were basically two things. One was there was a blackout in New York a few years earlier, I think in '78 or something. And basically the entire island of Manhattan went dark. There was no electricity. Entire island of Manhattan, no electricity. And things just started going crazy. You know, there was looting, rioting, people were like, breaking into businesses and stuff like that. It was like the whole world went crazy. And for 24 hours, there was no electricity. And it took basically on a rolling basis 3 days before all the electricity came back. I actually know a girl, talking about a horror story. I knew a girl who was in an elevator when the blackout happened. Who was trapped in an elevator for a day and a half.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
You can imagine that. So there was that. And then there was also a British psychiatrist by the name of R.D. Laing, who had sort of rethought the way mental patients were treated, and he had this sort of revolutionary thing where, and I'm grossly oversimplifying this, but to me it all sounded very funny because it was basically like it was his mental institution was like a country club, and if you said I've got little green men who are following me around, he would say, oh yeah, I see him, yeah, that guy right, that little green guy over there, and his feeling was like the world was crazy, and these were just people who had adapted to a crazy world. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
So those were the two things that went into the stew, and so I pitched them the story. Originally, it was supposed to take place in Manhattan. It was supposed to be that these guys escaped from mental hospital, and they terrorized Little Italy,
Okay.
and the mafia decided to round them up. So, but New Line didn't want to shoot in New York City. It was going to be too expensive. The unions were going to come in, and they want to deal with any of that stuff. So they want the mafia in there. So it was set more in the suburbs. So I went back and I rewrote the script for Alone in the Dark to make it scarier. Put in some stuff, just to create some good scares, and also constructed some other things to build the scares a lot better. Yeah. And for one reason or another, they were able to raise the money. I don't know whether because it was better or because it was just the timing was better, but anyway, so I got to do my first feature.
Now, wasn't that the first feature that New Line made as a production company? Is that true?
That close. Well, it was actually technically it was the second. But the first one, which is called Stunts, was a co-production. Okay. This was the first one that they did on their own. It was a New Line film. It was in association with other people, who had put up a lot of the funding. But this was the first one that was really their film that they did. And then the second one was Elm Street. So yeah. That really got things rolling.
Yeah, Bobby Shays' Empire. Now, said when did you first meet Bobby Shay?
I met him in 1969. His company was about a year old. Actually, the guy who I went to school with, who was my cameraman, was dating this girl who was working as a temp secretary for his company. So they had a room in lower Broadway above a bar, and they had 3 other people working there, and they needed. I was hoping that he would. My friend said you should take your films over there. Maybe he'll distribute your shorts. So I called him up, and he said, "Okay, drop them off." I dropped them off. He called me a few weeks later. He said, "Why don't you come by?" So I came by. He said, "Listen, I'm sorry. I liked your films, but we really can't use any shorts now." And I said, well, okay. And as I was getting up to leave, he said, by the way, do you know anybody who could cut a trailer? And I said, yeah, me. So, I never cut a trailer, but, I'd seen them. So I knew how to edit enough that I figured I could do it. And so he said, okay. And, at that point, an editing room, nobody owned the editing equipment. You need a Moviola or a Steenbeck or a Cam, and, it was expensive, and you had all this stuff. So, everybody rented editing rooms. Nobody had their own editing room. And so we went into somebody's editing room on a Friday night, like after they left for the weekend, and just basically took it over for the weekend. And we basically got in like, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock on a Friday night, and we didn't come out until like 6 a.m. on Monday morning. We had a trailer, and at that point we had become friends. And so anytime New Line needed a trailer, they needed to put titles on a foreign feature, or they needed to cut stuff out to get a rating or whatever, they call me up. Plus we were just personally friends. We just we hung out a lot. So I got to I got to meet a lot of people that I probably never would have met. And I mean, New Line were the first people to distribute John Waters.
Yes.
First people to distribute
yeah.
Werner Herzog. I mean, Bob always had a taste for the oddball.
Yeah.
I remember I was talking about. He said, "Jack, you got to see this film. You got to see this film." And he said, "You can't believe it." And so he shows me Pink Flamingos. And I mean, there's a scene where there's this girl and she lifts up her dress and she has a dick or something.
Yeah.
It just blew his mind,
Oh yeah, it's raucous.
Yeah, so
punk rock. Yeah, Pink Flamingos is a weird movie. There's a part at the end where Divine eats dog shit.
Yes.
I remember everybody getting crazy about that. I remember there was a weird scene earlier in the film where Divine's playing the mother of another dude, and she like sucks on his flaccid penis, and I remember that being like, what is going on here?
Yeah, it's pretty, like, if you had told me, how would you like to bet $1 million that one of John Waters' movies will be turned into a Broadway hit musical? I would have said, here's the money.
Yeah.
I mean, what are the odds that, and now he's, he goes around giving lectures at colleges and gets like, $20,000 to give a lecture. So
yeah.
He's sort of become a cultural icon.
He's an author too. He writes as well.
He's a Renaissance man. I mean, he's a very smart guy.
Yeah. You got to work on the Street Fighter film, rest in peace, Sonny Chiba. Was that because a New Line distributed that, right? I think.
Yeah, I cut the trailers.
Yeah.
I cut the trailers for the Street Fighter films.
Iconic.
If you got to fight dirty.
Yeah. You also wrote for the script for The Tattooed Hitman, right?
Well, you know what? It's interesting because that's somehow in my credits. And I was at a film festival, and Quentin Tarantino was there. And, so I met him. He said, "Oh, Jack Sholder, you wrote The Tattooed Hitman." And he didn't say, "Oh, you directed The Hidden," or Elm St. He said, "The Tattooed." I didn't write The Tattooed Hitman. I actually supervised the dubbing of the film into English. It was the only time that I ever. I did one other. I mean, New Line had a company that would handle all the dubbing. It was kind of a specialty, but for some reason I ended up doing it. So I was given like the translation of the Japanese script, and so I basically then took it and put it into better English, and so Bob gave me a writing credit because he wanted to make it sound like there were some Americans who worked on the film, because he didn't want it to sound like it was all Japanese,
Hey, that's what friends are for.
Yeah. So I did not deserve that credit at all, because I had nothing to do with writing the film.
Yeah.
I mean, there was another film he distributed the first film by Peter Weir, which was called The Cars That Ate Paris. I don't know whether you've ever seen it, but
I haven't seen that one. No, it's like
it's a really interesting film. I mean, there's a small town in the middle of nowhere in Australia, and the only thing they have going for it is a really bad curve. And so there are these car accidents that always happen on this curve, and there are all these people who are like, middle-aged, church-going kind of people, but they basically mine all these cars that there's something like rotten in there, in spite of the fact that everything looks, very normal and very middle class and everything. And then there are all these teenagers who have these like souped up cars that basically look like Mad Max cars. They have like teeth in the front and horns and stuff like that. And they're like represent like the real, like all of the bad stuff that's come out underneath, this middle class pretext. And it was a pretty interesting film. And of course, Peter Weir's a great filmmaker. I mean, he's a great filmmaker. And Bob called me up one day and said, "Well, I got this film by this new Canadian director, and I want to dub everybody with an American accent. So because nobody wants to see a film that was made in Australia." So I looked at the film and I thought, I don't really think I don't want to mess this film up. So and actually the storyline is that this one guy is driving through town. And he has an accident, and basically, like the mayor decides to adopt the guy as his son. So I said, why don't we just dub that guy as American? So it's like, so everybody else can be Australian, and there's an American guy who wanders into this weird town in Australia. So Bob, and it also saved Bob a lot of money. So that's what we did. And they also retitled the film, instead of the cars that ate Paris, because the little town's name was Paris. New Line retitled the film The Cars That Eat People, which I thought was really terrible. I've never met Peter Weir, but if I ever did, he'd probably punch me in the mouth.
It's okay. We'll put in a good word for you.
Okay.
I want to run back to Alone in the Dark real quick. That cast, another cast that is completely phenomenal. You know what I mean? You got Jack Palance, who has got to be one of the most intimidating actors on screen. Is he that way in real life? What's it like to work with Jack?
He was a very intimidating.
Yeah.
I mean, well, somehow he agreed to do the film. It was at a point in his career when he would basically do anything that paid, So we paid, not a huge amount of money. I think he got $60,000, which wasn't bad money at that time.
Yeah.
And the producer told him there wouldn't be any night shooting in Alone in the Dark. So, and then before we were going to start shooting the film, he had done a pilot for a TV series. It was Ripley's Believe It or Not, where he was like the host.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to go to Florence to shoot some stuff for the show while we were shooting our feature. And so he said, "Gee, sorry, I'm going to have to back out." And our producer said, "You can't do that. We have a contract. If you try to back out, we'll sue you." So he was like forced, instead of going to Florence, he was forced to like go to New Jersey and shoot all night long. So he was not a happy guy.
Yeah.
And this first day that we shot, which is my first day shooting a feature, it didn't go particularly well. It was like an easy day, and we didn't make the day. And we were out somewhere in the middle of New Jersey that hardly, the crew could barely find him. We got there, like guys from the union were standing there with their cameras taking pictures of everybody. And then at the end of the day, Bob says, I met Jack Palance, and he's really angry, and he's really pissed off. And we were walking down the street, and somebody said, hey, are you Jack Palance? And I thought he was going to punch the guy. So I had a panic attack.
Yeah.
I mean, literally a panic attack, and then he said, oh, and you have to have dinner with Martin Landau now. And so I went into a liquor store and I bought like a fifth of bourbon. And I got in the taxi cab and I'm like drinking the bourbon to try to calm myself down.
Yeah.
And I had dinner with Landau and his wife. And he's the nicest man in the world.
Yeah.
Lovely guy. And we stayed friends. He was like a mentor to me for a long time. And he was telling me stories that he had worked with Palance, and that, I don't know, he'd worked with this, there was this one actor, and he was supposed to hit the actor in the head with a lead pipe. And the prop guy gave him a rubber, a fake pipe.
Yeah.
And Palance says, what are you giving me a fake pipe for? I need a real pipe. I can't do this scene without. He said, well, what if you hit the guy? I said, I'm not going to hit the guy. You swing it, and the guy goes like this. And so the prop guy said, well, if the other actor's okay with it, so the other actor said, sure. If they do the scene, he cracks the guy's head open. So all of this is like not making me feel good. So I was like, pretty nervous. And I got back to my apartment, and I thought, I'm not going to let this guy push me around. I'm the fucking director. I'm not going to let him push me around. So I kind of managed to get to sleep, and I woke up the next day, and it's like, I'm the director. I'm not going to let this guy push me around. So I met him, and I said, Mr. Palance is on the set. We were shooting in this mansion, and we didn't have money for trailers or any stuff like that, but they had put him in like this big room, and they decorated with flowers and stuff. And I walk in, and this is huge room, and there's Palance sitting in a chair all the way at the far end of the room, like Mussolini, like you have to walk all the way across the room to get to him. And he was, I would say, cordial, polite, but not particularly friendly.
Yeah.
And there he is, that face that you see, and he's a big guy too, and he informed me that we had two scenes to do. One was dialogue scene, the one where he's introduced to Dwight Schultz, and they're walking along, and he says that none of us are crazy. Doctor, we're all just on vacation. And he said he couldn't do that scene because no one had told him, and he had trouble memorizing lines. And so he couldn't possibly do that scene today. And then there was another scene at night where they escape from the mental hospital, and they take a car from one of the doctors and kill the doctor. And he said, and I don't want to kill anybody. I really don't like violence, so I don't want to kill anybody. So that was the start. So I said, well, look, Jack, we got to shoot this dialogue scene this afternoon, and that's the only time we can shoot it. So we'll do whatever you need. You want me to make up cue cards? I'll make up cue cards. You want me to break it up into little pieces? I can do that. And it was a walk and talk. So I set up, it was a long dolly shot, but I was prepared to shoot it, however we could shoot it.
Yeah.
And when it came time to shoot it, probably, 3 or 4 hours later, first take, he just nailed it.
Yeah.
And the second take, which is, I think, the one that we used, he nailed it again, even better. And I said, and I was like, wow, Jack, that was incredible. That was absolutely, I mean, not that he had done it, but that he had done it so incredibly well. It was just like, holy shit, he was so really good. I mean, he's great in that scene.
Yeah.
And I said, Jack, that was amazing. And he looked at me and said, you're full of shit. And that was his way of, that was like the New York thing. That was his way of, like, New Yorkers or, people in Boston probably say, fuck you when they mean, hey, I love you,
Yeah.
So that was his way of and that kind of broke the ice. And then later on, after that, we broke for dinner, and I went back to his room, and he was friendlier. And I said, so what are we going to do about tonight? And he said, well, I really don't want to kill anybody. And I said, well, Jack, it's in the script. He said, well, why? So I said, well, we need to know your character is capable of murder. And he looks at me with his face and he says, they'll know. And he was right.
Yeah.
You need to do anything. You just knew.
Yeah.
From the way he carried himself, who he was. It was like one of the great lessons I learned about filmmaking.
Brando was like that too a little bit. He was like a little difficult. I heard a recent story about Michael Ironside, where he was like, you test the directors. You know what I mean? There was a new director in that situation, this Ironside, where you give a little push to see how much that will stand behind what they believe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you do get tested, you know. And so I said, well, what are we going to do? I mean, somebody's got to kill him. She said, well, have the fat guy do it. So I said, all right. So I went up to Shay, who was, wandering around somewhere. And I said, listen, Jack doesn't want to kill anybody. He says, let's have the fat guy do it. Erlen Van Lith, who by the way, is like a graduate of MIT.
Oh.
Was like a genius IQ guy. I mean, and I said, I don't think we need to have Jack do it. And I said, okay, fine. So that was that.
You brought up Landau.
Yeah.
That's an extremely dark character too. There's like a comedic and super dark at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's quite funny in a way.
Was there a lot of improv and with those characters, or was it straight from the script?
Straight from the script, but they took it to places that I wouldn't have necessarily taken it. Like, I mean, when you have people like that, I mean, the reason that they're famous, unless they just have a pretty face, but the reason that they're famous is there's something about them, the choices they make or what they do, that's just compelling. That just there's something about them that's special. I mean, if you go to a rock concert and there's some like rock star, you could be sitting way in the back and you can feel that energy that person is exuding,
Right.
And it's the same thing with these great actors that just says they have this ability to project their emotion like a beam at you, and you feel what they're feeling, and you can, they can say, yeah, I feel great, and that they're, hurting or whatever, you can, their emotions just come out to the audience, and they have a kind of a charisma. I mean, I've worked with people who were really good actors, wonderful actors who didn't have that. And then other people who were not as good, but they had some kind of charisma, When you get both, then you get, the real deal.
Yeah. I think Landau was probably like the middle personality with Jack Palance was kind of intense. Landau was in the middle. And then Donald Pleasance always, I always feel like it's good times around Donald. Like he's happy, you know what I mean? Big, lovable, very huggy, like in the movie, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was the the first of the people that we cast. You know, basically the producer came to me and he said, I think I can get Donald Pleasance for this role. What do you think? And you know, I thought Donald Pleasance was one of the great character actors in the world.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, I could work with Donald Pleasance. That would be like, you know, heaven. And so, you know, we paid him. He showed up. I mean, that's, you know, the British actors that I've worked with. I haven't worked with a lot, but you know, I've worked with a half a dozen, and it's kind of what they're like. They're very professional. You know, they don't put up a fuss. They basically they show up. You know, it's a job. They show up. They do their job. They get paid. They go home. You know, it's like I've said in some other interviews. It's like, you know, you hire a plumber. The plumber doesn't say, "What kind of bathroom do you have?" I don't know if I want to work in a bathroom like that. You know, they come over and they say, "Okay, show me where the toilet's." Okay. And you pay them their, you know, their $150 and they leave. And that's it, you know. They don't, you know, and that was kind of the way Palance was, you know. So it was I mean, I was more intimidated by him than I was, honestly, by Palance.
Really?
Well, because, you know, I knew Palance was you know, a terrific actor, but I thought, you know, Pleasance was like one of the great actors of the world. And so how am I going to direct this guy?
Yeah.
But it's kind of like you get in a Ferrari, you know, and you just nudge the wheel and suddenly you go around the corner. That's what it was like, you know. It's just, you don't have to like stomp on the gas pedal or you know, you just, you know, you give him a little bit and, you know, there it is. So.
Is there like actors that big? Is there pre-production work that you do with them, or is it pretty much, you know, they get the script, you give some notes, and then they show up, and you guys kind of jive with what that day? How's that kind of?
I try to rehearse.
Yeah.
I try to get a few days to rehearse, but in the case of Alone in the Dark, they just showed up on the day.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know how much Donald and I discussed the role. You know, he just came in and we did a scene, and he was. I mean, the first scene that we did, you know, we did take one, and my mind went completely blank.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't focus on anything. So I said, that was pretty good, Donald. Let's try it one more time. So he did it again, and I could kind of focus. And I gave him a note, a small adjustment. He said, okay. And he did exactly what I asked him to do. And I thought, hey, this isn't that bad, you know. The guy just did what I asked him. Because, you know, I was having like these nightmares where I'd be on the set and nobody would listen to me.
Yeah. Or
I'd be on the set. I still have this dream where I'm on the set and I'm like in my pajamas and I kind of don't want anybody to notice that I'm in my pajamas, or maybe I'm just in my underwear. You know, and I haven't read the script. You know, I guess it's a common dream that people have. You know, the actor's nightmare where they get out on the stage and they don't know what the play is or what they're doing. So it's a common anxiety dream. So the fact that I was able to like ask him to do something, actually listen to me.
Yeah.
Was impressive. You know, I said, well, okay.
Yeah, man, I can only imagine the nerve-wrackingness of being on your first feature-length film. There's a lot on the line, and now you have those three gigantic personalities. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Landau was very easy, and I mean, it wasn't like I never directed a film. You know, I mean, I had done The Garden Party. I had worked with Beatrice Straight. I had worked with some good actors. I'd worked with a few actors who were a little bit difficult. You know, not terribly difficult, but a little bit difficult. Yeah. And I wrote the script, and I had a very, very strong idea of exactly what I wanted. And that was what I was going to get. I mean, there was a scene where, you know, Palance and I disagreed, and there's a scene where the three of them are lying in bed. Mm-hmm. The three maniacs, and they're like plotting about how to get out. And Palance said, I want to stand up. And I said, no, I need you to lie in the bed. I had this, like when I wrote the scene, like these three peas in a pod that they're just all lying there in bed. And Palance want to get up and walk around. And I said, no, I really need you to lie in the bed. And we couldn't agree. And after about 5 minutes, Lando said, do it the kid's way. Give the kid a break. Just do it the kid's way. And so Palance did it my way.
Yeah.
And then actually a few days later we were shooting the scenes in the mall where there's rioting.
Yeah.
And it was like a complete disaster. We didn't have enough time and everything went wrong, and I was exhausted because we'd shot for like 20 hours straight the night before. I got like 3 hours of sleep, and then another horrible night. And at one point, my mind just went blank. I figured out there was only one way out, because they let all the extras go except for, and I needed the extras to do this. Like I figured, well, how can I take this big scene and just boil it down into one shot or two? And the extras that I needed, they sent them home. And so my mind just went blank. I just didn't know what to do. I mean, it was like one of the lowest points of my life at that point. And so Palance and Land.
Had to move him around per shot type deal, get into that territory.
It was just that I figured out there was a whole big thing that happens inside the shopping center, and they had created a space for me to do it. But, I had, instead of a 12-hour day or night, I had like 4 hours, and I had very few extras. And then the things that I needed, I figured out, okay, here's how I can make this work. And then, they had sent the extras away. So my mind just crashed. And so there was a room where Landau and Palance and Erlen, the four escapees were waiting. And I walked in there and I said, listen, guys, I'm really sorry, but I've had kind of a setback here, and I'm not quite sure what we're going to do, but I'll figure something out, and it was pretty clear that I was just totally, fucked up. And as I turned around to leave the room, Palance said, hey, Jack. And I said, yeah, I think he's going to give me some shit. He says, remember that scene the other night where you wanted us to all lie in the bed? And I said, yeah. He said, you were right. And then he just turned around and walked away. But that was the kind of guy he was.
Yeah. Earl Lid's what you gotta, he might not be a big name like the other three, but he definitely held his own in that film for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had a terrific cast. I mean, Dwight Schultz.
Yeah.
And the little girl and what's her name, Hedwig, who played Dwight's wife. I mean, we had a really good cast. Cast.
The family was great. Yeah, the family dynamic of it was really well, which is good, because sometimes when the family dynamic isn't quite, it throws off the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those are the things that you really have to be careful about. It's like kind of the horror will take care of itself. The action will take care of itself. You got to build the characters so the characters are believable, and you care about the characters. So then you care about what happens to them. Yeah. So that was always important for me.
Yeah. And it definitely does. Anybody out there listening who haven't seen Alone in the Dark, go pick it up immediately. It's psychological horror. You know what I mean? It gets in there. Next up, we're gonna mosey into the next film, which is A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, which is coming off of the success of the first one. Those are big shoes to fill. And I think I heard that Wes was attached to direct for a while, up until the last 2 weeks or something like that.
Last 6 weeks, yeah.
6 weeks, and he issue with the script because he didn't like how he came into real life, I believe, right?
Right, exactly. Right. So they called me up. There was going to start shooting in 6 weeks and asked me if I would do it. Because I was familiar with it. Because I had read an early draft of the script. I'd read the shooting script. I had a little bit to do with the editing. I mean, very little, but I was in the editing room for a couple days with the editor. And I had a pretty good understanding of what it was all about. So, and they trusted me, and basically they wanted a film called Nightmare on Elm Street with a 2 at the end of it, so they could squeeze some more money out of the title. That was basically where they were at with it. So, yeah. So I mean, my first reaction was to say no, because I didn't want to do another horror film. I didn't want to do a sequel to a horror film, which is even worse. Not that I had a lot going. I mean, Alone in the Dark, and actually, I went back and I looked at some of the reviews a while ago, and actually got good reviews. But it never really caught on. Yeah. And it could have been my my one and only feature, or maybe I mean, who knows.
True.
But a friend of mine, the guy who had produced The Garden Party, was now out in Hollywood, very successful producer, he said, Jack, don't be an idiot. The film's going to make a lot of money, and you'll have a directing career. So I said yes. I thought it was kind of a challenge, and it was, again, it was very scary, because there was it was very complicated. There were a huge number of special effects, none of which I knew how to do. The scale and scope of the film was much bigger. I didn't feel pressured to create a masterpiece, or that the franchise was in my hands, and if I screwed it up, none of that ever crossed my mind. And New Line never really put any. They just wanted to get it done. They had a script, and they just wanted the script to get done, well, and that was it. The only thing that they told me was they wanted to keep Freddy dark. They didn't like the makeup, the original makeup, and they wanted to keep him dark and scary. So that was the only thing that they really, told me.
And he is. He's I think the scariest he looks in the entire franchise is part 2. That the way the skin, when they later show him with like some flesh tone to it with the burns as well, I think that it's just kind of the way his face is in part 2. I was just like, it's burnt. It's got that vibe to it. I really love the shots. Yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, they didn't like the makeup, so I found Kevin Yeager. Who Kevin was really. He's not one of these makeup artists who like grew up reading Fangoria and looking at bodies of corpses. He went to art school. He was a sculptor.
Yeah.
Who then got a job working for Rick Baker. But he really he was an artist. So so I like that about him. And he was basically. I mean, we had another guy by the name of Mark Shostrom who had his own team. Yes. Who did like the transformation effects and some of that. Kevin's main job was Freddy, which was every day was 3-4 hours to put his makeup on, and then he did a few other things, but and then Jacques Haitkin, who was the cameraman, he had shot the first one, and he's a really good cameraman. He was somebody that I had actually wanted to get to shoot Alone in the Dark, but either he wasn't available, or we couldn't pay him enough money, or whatever. So he had already shot the first one, so he was very familiar with the whole thing. So I think that he was able to even do a better job on the second one. Yeah. I remember the scene where he like pulls the skull away. Yep. Says you got the body, I've got the brains, and the Jacques just took a really long time to he had like these little these little lights with these little things called snoots, little tubes on the end that he could just pinpoint light, and he was just, it just had it was very, very, very intricate to get it just right. If Robert had moved 1 inch, this way or that, it wouldn't have, but Robert is real pro.
Oh yeah, for sure. There was time, I believe, where Robert, he was up in the air a little bit for part 2, right? Them bringing him in, or
I asked them if they were bringing him back, and they said, well, he wants more money. His agent's asking for more money. We don't want to give him more. They felt they were being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
So I said, well, and at that point, all they knew was that Elm Street made money. Bob was very excited about Elm Street, the original Elm Street, because he thought the concept, the script was so great. He just loved the whole idea of it.
Yeah.
And, this is before they cast Robert Englund as Freddy or, anything else, or Johnny Depp or anything else. He loved the concept, and he was convinced it was going to be a hit. And so when it was a hit, I think that what he thought was, well, I guess I was right, that the script, this concept was such a great concept that it made a lot of money. So, and Robert was really good, but he was just one element, because at that point, like Friday the 13th, the killer, basically jumps up, kills people, and goes away, and anybody could do it, like in Halloween. The thing that they didn't understand, they didn't fully get, was that Wes, if you look at Robert Englund, you wouldn't picture him as the guy who's going to be this horrible, child killer,
Yeah.
He almost looks goofy in a way, and he's not big, he's not hulking, he's none of that, I mean, he's not small, but he's a normal sized guy.
Yeah.
But he's very wired. He's very, got a lot of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, the smartest thing that Wes did with that movie was cast Robert, who was not the obvious choice for the role. And so they just thought, we'll get somebody else, just like, you get somebody else to play Leatherface or whatever, doesn't matter. He's got a lot of makeup on. However, we never, one of the main things I was doing was casting the movie. I was living in New York. I flew out to LA where the movie was being shot. And, I spent a lot of time, casting all the parts, but I never saw anybody for Freddy. So it never occurred to me then, but, when I think back on it, if they really definitely weren't going to hire somebody to replace him, they would have had other people coming in for the role. They never had anybody come in for the role. So I think, in the back of their minds, they're going to hire him, but they were just playing hardball,
Well, yeah, but I got to give you a little credit too, because if you as a director said, you know what, guys, that might be a good idea, they probably would have leaned more in the direction of replacing him.
Yeah. Probably if I said, I don't think it matters. We can get anybody to play that role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where Robert Englund wasn't Freddy Krueger. That'd be crazy. If it was different people each movie like the other franchises, that'd be kind of crazy.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is that when we were in post-production, they hired a publicist.
Yeah.
Full time. They hired this guy. He lived in LA, but we edited the film in New York because, New Line's headquarters were still in New York, and I was living in New York. So we edited it in New York. And so this guy basically was brought on, and he said, look, I read this article that I don't know, in the University of Minnesota, somewhere like that, they had done a survey, like who's the scariest man in America? They had said Freddy Krueger. And so he said, let's create a campaign where we say Freddy Krueger is the scariest man in America. We'll create this myth that Freddy's the scariest man in America.
Yeah.
And they said, well, okay, that sounds like a good idea. and they did a midnight screening, and they claimed that people were now imitating Freddy Krueger, and so they held this midnight screening, and and they let the press know, and then they hired people to dress up as Freddy Krueger, to so it would look like people were. And so, to their surprise, other people came that they didn't pay, were dressed up as Freddy Krueger. They said maybe something's going on here.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I was with Bob when the movie opened, and whenever Freddy was on screen, the audience would go crazy. And at that point, they realized that because if you look at the original poster, Freddy's not on the poster.
Right.
There's no Freddy. There's a claw. And that's really was New Line's mentality, was the claw, the concept.
Yeah.
But there's no Freddy. If you then, I mean, I have
yeah, I wanted to ask you about the posters too after, because there's it's the only one in the franchise, I think, that actually has two this definitive posters. That VHS artwork of him creeping around the corner with the glove, I loved to death. I that was one of the first visuals of Freddy I ever seen.
Right. Well, I mean, after the movie came out, on the DVD,
yeah,
they, Freddy's in the poster, and he gets top billing. If you look at I'm looking at the original poster right now. It's the Man of Your Dreams is back.
Yeah.
And it says, Mark Patton gets top billing, and then it says at the end, and Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. If you look now, it says Robert Englund, gets the top billing. So
from theatrical to VHS, they earned a lot of respect with the producers.
Well, yeah, and then it was clear that that they were going to have to pay him whatever he wanted.
Do you know where exactly that second artwork came from? I really love that second artwork a lot. The peeking around the corner.
The full set here.
I remember that was so expensive when that came out. That was like $150, and that seemed like the sky's the limit of Mundo priceage when it came out. But I had it. I got that.
Oh, this actually has the.
That's got the theatrical, yeah.
The original poster on it.
It does, yeah. The only time I've ever seen the other one is for the VHS cover artwork. That's why I was very interested, because I know that it goes back and forth with people liking both. But I know that second, the VHS artwork is beloved, I think, visually. I was just curious, but that kind of makes sense with the way they're promoting it. They're promoting it more as selling it as a Freddy movie by the time the VHS came around.
Well, yeah. Because Nightmare on Elm Street was Freddy.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of Freddy, what's it like to direct Freddy Krueger? Robert Englund. At this point in the game, Robert might not even have been fully aware of the full Freddy character. It was still in development. You know what I mean? What was it like directing him?
Well, as you may have heard, because they waited so long, like 2 weeks before we were going to shoot, they said, we managed to close the deal with Robert. So it was like, oh, that's fantastic. And then I bumped into him. I was at a theater production. For some reason, I think Lynn Shay knew somebody and dragged me to a theater production. And Robert happened to be in the audience. And so we saw each other, and we talked for the intermission, we talked like a mile a minute for 15 minutes, just nonstop. And then we went and watched the rest of it. And then the first week that we shot, we shot the shower scene. And there's one shot of Freddy where he walks out of the shower, and he wasn't available because he had taken a job, and he wasn't available the first week of shooting. So we had an extra, and the extra was awful. And you could just tell he wasn't Freddy. If you watch it, you could, hopefully you don't really nobody really notices. But if you really look, you can tell it's not just the way he walks, the way he carries himself. And then the following week, Robert was available, and I mean, he knew what the character was all about. He knew what he was doing. So it wasn't like I had to tell him where to stand, in terms of how I had set up the shot and all that. But in terms of how he was going to do the character, he had everything figured out.
Yeah.
And he was, I mean, he's a total professional. Very skilled, very professional. Had a great attitude. Very easy to work with. Very open to suggestions. Very creative. I mean, he was, he was a pleasure to work with. And you always got 100%. He would come up with a few things. I mean, so yeah, he was great. This
was the first film you worked with Clue on, right?
Right. Yeah. Yes, and I had such a good time with him. Loved him so much that I cast him in my next film.
Yeah, him and Mark's. I love the dynamic of him and Mark with the father and son. There's such a weird dynamic there, but it's fun. It's like a very fun character little collaboration.
Yeah, well, I mean, Clue is kind of, the way the character was written, it was pretty much of a caricature, not a character. Like a caricature of the dumb adult, who doesn't get what's going on, and it was very broadly written. And Clue could kind of play into that goofy part of it, but there's a scene. It kind of tells you about Clue. Because he has to act like a complete dick to his son, and he's like completely clueless to what's going on, and he doesn't seem to have any recognition of that his son is suffering and all the rest of that stuff. And there's this scene where after the scene in the shower, the cops bring him back to the house like late at night.
Yeah.
And the next day it's like, well, you're going out. What are you taking, drugs or whatever? But when Mark comes into the house, there's this moment where Clue just kind of like touches his face, and it's very kind of loving. Like he just, it wasn't in the script, but he just couldn't help it. Like, that he just knew that this guy is his son, and it was just something that he put in that very much is like Clue. It was just a wonderful, just a good human being.
It was a touching moment. Yeah, he was
he's just a good. Son. Yeah, he's just a good person.
Yeah, I like the. Some people give part 2 hard times. I like part 2 a lot. Of course, it has like people say that it's been called one of the gayest horror movies, which is, it is what it is. I think it's great times. You know what I mean? You can kind of see it going back and forth, but I think it's just kind of like, I think Mark, he has a little feminine thing to him, which is that's awesome. And I think that's kind of what it is. Everybody says, well, they knew they were making, that's what they knew they were making. And a lot of people say no, and I can understand no, because it's just kind of the character, and it flows a little bit of the real person comes out of the character type deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, every interview that I do, somebody asks me this.
Yeah, I figured that.
so I it's something that I've thought about, and I've said this a number of times. So if any of your viewers have already heard this, you can fast forward. But when I was doing the script, when I was directing the film, I had very little input into the script. Normally, I have a lot of input into the script. But in this case, basically, the script was what it was, and we didn't have a lot of time to mess around with the script. Dylan was happy with the script, so the job was to pretty much shoot the script. So I saw it as about teen anxiety. So I mean, first of all, this is early 1980s. Things were not politically correct. There was none of that kind of none of that kind of stuff was around. And I saw it as about teen sexual anxiety,
Right.
you know, and you know, it's this it the script basically the final girl role was played by a guy,
Yeah.
and so I saw a lot of actors for the role, and Mark was the one that was my clear choice, because he, he seemed to be able to convey a lot of vulnerability.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I said, send me an actor who can convey vulnerability, but it was just like that was kind of what I sensed was needed for the role.
Yeah.
And he was very good looking. And, honestly, no one had any, the idea that he was gay never came, wasn't like, I wonder if he's gay. It wasn't anything that even was crossed anybody's mind. We just weren't thinking along those lines. And in fact, the girls at New Line were saying, "Oh, he's really hot." He was like another Johnny Depp. He was really this hot young guy, and he was supposedly somebody who was really on his way up. And obviously they had made a good choice when they cast Johnny Depp, and so that was kind of how everybody saw him.
Yeah.
I found out sort of later in the shooting that he was gay, but before that, I had no idea. It never occurred to me. I mean, when I watched the film, I hadn't seen it in a long time, and it was after everybody was sort of talking about, what the gay aspect of the film. And I think that, if we had cast a young Brad Pitt in that role, people would not be saying that. Somebody that really projects real masculinity.
Yeah.
But Mark's agents had told him, do not let anybody know you're gay. It'll ruin your career. You have to stay well in the closet.
Yeah.
And Mark read the script, and Mark never made that association. It wasn't until one of the makeup artists said, "Do you realize what the script is all about?"
Yeah.
And then he said, "Oh, fuck," and then he kind of freaked out. But he never picked up on it. None of the critics picked up on it except for the Village Voice. There was one critic in the Village Voice who said this is the gayest horror film of all time, but nobody else picked up on that. I mean, it's kind of interesting. There was an article, I don't know, a few years ago in Fangoria about Mark. Because Mark quit the business after Elm Street. And he basically disappeared. He got AIDS. He almost died. He survived. His boyfriend died of AIDS. Pretty horrible. And then he got better, and he found another career as a interior designer, and then he moved to Mexico. And actually, when they did Never Sleep Again, it was a wonderful documentary about the whole Elm Street series. They actually hired a private detective to find him, and they tracked him down to Mexico. Now he's back on the scene, and he's promoting the movie and all that. But it was a very traumatic thing for him. But there's this whole new interpretation of the film. I mean, it's taught in colleges. There are courses, where they include this. So, I went to I think it was the first convention that I went to. It was like a 30th reunion for Elm Street, and I hadn't seen Mark literally since we finished shooting the movie, and he had been through a lot, and now it was this whole new interpretation of the film, and for me, Elm Street came out, made a lot of money. I didn't feel a real personal attachment to it the way I did with Alone in the Dark or The Hidden or some of my other films, and then suddenly the phone started ringing, and I was working, and people wanted me to direct movies. I had a career. My friend was was right. But so I just saw it as kind of a stepping stone for me. You know, for Mark, the clock stopped there, so he was kind of, you know, thought a lot more about it than I had. But I mean, now that I understand it, and I've seen Mark, and I've seen
his story,
gay kids who are able to identify and feel validated, and so I'm delighted that all that has happened. And you know, while it wasn't my intention to do that, it's kind of a very good unintended consequence. And I think you know, there's a way to interpret it that completely follows that kind of interpretation. You know, I mean, you could interpret it in a completely different way. I mean, you could call it a Christ analogy. You know, here's this guy, you know, he has a woman who, you know, he suffers, he's kind of crucified in a way. He comes back to life again. I mean, you know, there's you could do that, you know, bit by bit by bit, you could run it through, and you could come up with a validation that it's a Christ analogy. And you know, I never really talked to Dave Chaskin, you know, who I knew pretty well, but I mean, he and I never really discussed the script. But you know, that might have been on his mind too. But you know, it's all part of like the hero's journey kind of thing. Yeah. You know, but that's in there, and you know, that probably gives it some of its weight. And you know, a lot of initially everybody sort of brushed the film aside, and then it's like, well, let's get back to 3, where it sort of gets back to, you know, the real Freddy, where actually Freddy really becomes more of a stand-up comedian, you know. Right. I really liked 3. I thought 3 was really entertaining. I mean, but you know, that and Wes's New Nightmare are my 2 favorites from the series.
Did you make a point to catch the other sequels?
I saw them all. Yeah. I saw them all. I mean, I thought as it went on, they sort of each one got just a little worse. I mean, 4 was pretty good. 5 I thought was kind of, and 6. And then I thought, you know, Wes's New Nightmare, I really liked that. I thought Wes was a much better director
at that point.
He was when he did the original one. But yeah, I mean, sequels were different at that time. You know, sequels are just a way to squeeze some more money out of the title. Yeah. So we never felt that we were working with a sacred text where we had to, you know, we just wanted to make a movie that we thought was going to be good and entertaining and all that. And you know, it did have Freddy, and it did have the concept, and there was all that, but we never felt that there was, you know, other than those things, that there was anything that was sacred about the original Elm Street. And so we just kind of made our own movie, you know. I mean, by the time they got to 3, now there's really a franchise going on, you know. And so they have to pay attention to the franchise. Although I have to say that I think that the Elm Street series, of all the horror film series, I think it's the most interesting, because each one really is different. Each one really, I mean, 3 and 4 are kind of very similar in tone. I mean, 5 was very different. Yeah. And 6 was, I don't know, whatever.
It was different. It was very campy, almost like the vibe of I Love Freddy's Dead has such a fun 90s vibe to it. But I think that's what saves it, is that 90s vibe, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think 5 was probably my least favorite. Like, I think they were trying to do something a little too arty with it, and it just kind of fell flat for me. But so I think I got interviewed by there are these 2 women who have a Facebook blog or something about Elm Street, and they had interviewed me. They were one of the early people that interviewed me about the movie, and I don't know, there was some. I think people were mostly appreciative, but there was someone who said, well, you know, it violates the series and blah, blah, blah. And one of the girls replied, you have to look at it as its own movie, you know? If you look at it as just you know, did it follow all the rules of number one? Okay, no. But just as a movie on its own, you know, how does it work? And that's kind of how we approached it, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, it is what it is. I mean, I still get a nice check every year from Warner Brothers, so I'm very grateful, and it gave me a career. So I mean, on that level, you know, it was actually, despite all my initial anxiety, it was actually a fun movie to make. I had a good time. I mean, I managed to get it all figured out before I started shooting, which is how I work. You know, I basically figured everything out. I plan out every single scene, every single shot of the movie. Not that I necessarily shoot it that way, but I pretty much have a plan for how I'm going to shoot the whole movie, and I have everything figured out. So you know, I was really scared shitless when we were prepping the film. But you know, day one, I walked on the set, and it was like, you know, I got this. You know, so and you know, it was a good group of people. And it was a fun movie to make. Good time. I mean, I managed to get it all figured out before I started shooting, which is how I work. You know, I basically figured everything out. I plan out every single scene, every single shot of the movie. Not that I necessarily shoot it that way, but I pretty much have a plan for how I'm going to shoot the whole movie, and I have everything figured out. So you know, I was really scared shitless when we were prepping the film. But you know, day one, I walked on the set, and it was like, you know, I got this. You know, so and you know, it was a good group of people, and it was a fun movie to make.
Well, it's legendary. It's iconic. It's part of one of the biggest horror franchises of all time.
Yeah.
Whenever people bring up them being awake, when Freddy comes in part 2, I always argue the fact that the teenagers have passed out from drinking, and the ones that die are the ones that passed out, and they're imagining their friends there with them. So you can use that if you want.
Well, this is kind of after the fact.
Yeah.
But if you're Freddy, and your goal is, you know, how can I kill and terrorize as many people as possible? If I can only come out in your dream, I can only kill you. But if I could figure out a way to come out when I'm not in somebody's dream, because I'm trapped in the dream. Yeah. If I could figure out a way to come out when I'm not in the dream, imagine all the damage I could do.
Yeah.
So in a sense, that is an evolution for Freddy. I mean, they didn't go with that, you know. In the next one, they went back to, well, he can only come out during the dreams. I mean, honestly, I never even got that. Like, I mean, for me, when we were shooting the film, you know, like, I could care less. I thought it was a good scene at the swimming pool. What the hell?
Great scene, yeah.
So
it's great. I mean, like I said, to go back to the horrifying, how scary he looks. I mean, you have him pretty much lit up with the fire. You know, it's fully lit scenes, and he just looks. He's oozing. He's like melting while you're looking at him. He just looks horrible in the red. I think it's the only one he has really red eyes, fiery eyes, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah. So and all those kind of slightly tacky old time effects, you know, the boilings, you know, it was all done by this real old timer who, you know, he'd been doing special effects like since the 40s.
Yeah.
I asked him, you know, and he'd worked with like everybody. You know, he was the head of special effects at, I think, 20th Century Fox for like a long time, and I said, so of all the people or the films that you've worked on, what are you the most proud of? And he thought, I said, I think the work I did with the Three Stooges. That was encouraging.
He built the gorilla. The gorilla suit was built by him.
Probably. But he was, you know, like, they had this stuff like, you know, when you saw people like grab like the doorknob to get out and smoke comes out. So there's this stuff called AB smoke. So you put the A stuff on the doorknob and the B stuff on the hand, and when they touch, this, you know, it's like the stuff you'd buy like in a magic shop, or, you know,
Yeah, I've always wondered how they do that effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, part two is definitely a good film, and it's art. To go back to what we were talking about before with music and film, it's art. It's like because it has different reactions on different people. There's people like it for the horror aspect. You know, there it's an empowerment movie now. You know what I mean? Which is you gotta, especially nowadays where it's fighting for the freedom of sexuality, if you will. It's important. It might be the most important film in the franchise when you look at it in that
Yeah.
regard. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's actually had a social impact.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I was at a convention, and there was a guy that I met, and he said your film saved my life, and I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I had cancer, and I was going through all this treatment, and I was like really really sick, and I just felt horrible, and I thought, what can I do to make me feel better? And he said, I really loved Elm Street too. So I started, I would watch the movie, and it got me through my chemotherapy and everything. And I thought, wow, that's like one of the best things anybody's ever said to me.
Yeah,
So
that's huge. It goes back to
yeah,
the beginning when you said, you walked out of that theater with the uplifting feeling. I mean, that's full circle type stuff. You are literally living what you
yeah,
wanted to do. You know what I mean?
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm totally grateful that people like my films. I mean, for me, that was like that's why that's really why I did it. It wasn't to get girls, it wasn't to become rich, it wasn't and that other stuff. It was to make people feel those emotions like I felt. And so you know a few times I was able to actually do that.
Yeah. The good ones do it for those reasons. You know what I mean? That's to entertain people, take people out of there. If if they're having tough times, to be able to pull them out of the badness for an hour and a half or whatever. Like I've always found that the people that want to make these things for those reasons are like the ones you can kind of get behind.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
We're gonna jump into the hidden real quick because we've had you on for a long time.
Yes, yeah.
So we're gonna
Yes.
hit. We'll be semi quick with the hidden.
All
The
right.
next film up is The Hidden, which is another masterpiece. I love. It's a
Great movie. Great movie.
it's a great mashup of sci-fi and action. You do action incredibly well. I wanted to comment. You know what I mean? I think that great mashup. Now The Hidden, it's creature feature-esque with like the sluggy thing, and I can't wait to see The Hidden on a big Blu-ray 4K edition because that'll look ridiculously well. You know what I mean?
Well, it's out there. It's
It's
out there.
they get a Blu-ray?
Yeah, there's a Blu-ray. Yeah,
Really?
yeah, yeah. The Blu-ray's been out for. I got it here somewhere. Well, anyway, yeah, there is a Blu-ray.
That
Yeah.
one snuck by me. I got 2 VHS. I'm an old school guy with VHS up the yin yang.
Yeah. Well, it's nice for nostalgia, but honestly, it looks like shit. If you
Yeah. No, I appreciate the Blu-ray, and I go to support too, because I'd hope you're getting some kickback from the Scream Factory release of Alone in the Dark and or Shout Factory. I'm losing my mind, and you know what I mean. In this, hopefully,
Scream Factory, I think.
yeah. Which it's good. We got to give props to Scream Factory because they're
Yes.
leading a righteous cause. You know what
Yes.
I mean? For sure.
Yeah, they're releasing a lot of interesting movies.
So how'd The Hidden come about after Nightmare 2?
Well, so after Elm Street 2, I basically the film opened up on Friday, and it made a lot of money over the weekend. And Monday morning, the head of my agency, who I'd never spoken to before, calls me up and says, Dino De Laurentiis is going to call you from his car in 5 minutes. This is like in 1983, when people didn't call you from their cars. It was like Dino De Laurentiis and, Jack, I want to do a movie with you. let's do a movie, So I never did do a movie with Dino, but I realized that everything had changed at that moment,
Yeah.
So, but I didn't want to do another horror film. Everybody wanted me. I was getting offered all these horror films, and most of them, sucked. Most of them were stupid and formulaic, and I certainly didn't want to do that. And then actually, New Line came to me with the hidden, the head of production, Sarah Risher, said, Jack, we've got the script, and I think it'd be perfect for you. I think you'll love it. So I said, sure, let me see it. So they sent the script over. I read the script. I just loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I said, I got to make this movie. And they sort of had another director who was loosely attached to it. And I came in, and I strongly pitched myself, and then I met the producers and pitched them, and we hit it off, and they said, okay, you're going to make the movie. So I was thrilled because that was it was like a perfect script for me. I'd always been a huge admirer of Sidney Lumet's cop movies, like Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, all those films. I loved those films. I loved all cop movies, film noir, all that kind of stuff, because while I was never a big horror fan, I love thrillers, a great genre. I'm a huge Hitchcock fan, and so it was kind of like a Sidney Lumet movie with aliens.
Yeah.
It was all about cops. So I kind of loved it. I loved that it had a similar sense of humor to mine, and it also had some humanistic elements to it, because I thought it was about what it meant to be human. Because you have a bad alien who's come to Earth and is learning how to be a bad human being. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, all those things that are bad.
Yeah.
And then you have a good alien who comes to Earth, and he's learning how to be a good human being. And that was and you have this basically one character who goes into 7 different bodies, including a dog. So for me, there was always like this idea of like, who am I? What am I wearing? Because he has to jump into another body, and then it's like, well, what am I? Like there were all these scenes that I put in where they're looking in a mirror, trying to figure out what is this thing I'm a dog. I have a snout and paws, or I got tits. It's like so I thought it was really an really interesting concept. So I was just completely gung ho on making that film.
Yeah, it's good. I like the dynamic between the two good guy, detectives, if you will.
Yeah.
And the breakdown of it, the detective, Michael Nori, the character played Michael Nori. He's kind of twisted up in his head, trying to not knowing what to believe, if he can believe this gentleman who came from afar to help him. Well, he doesn't believe he's from afar. It's a far-fetched story. If somebody tells you that from the get-go, you want to be like, don't want to believe them.
Yeah.
But it comes together really. Kyle MacLachlan.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, it was fantastic in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's like he plays it kind of like deadpan a little bit, but like there's emotion. You can feel the emotion under the surface, and very good. You know what I mean? It's a very good vibe. Now that they stole that gun for the Men in Black films, you know what I mean? It had that vibe. The little there it look at that. Is that the original?
That's the original, yeah.
Holy
if
moly.
You look at it, you can see it's actually cracked.
Oh yeah.
It got dropped and broken and glued together and spray painted, and that's it. Yeah, that's interesting what you said about Kyle, because when I was shooting the film, I thought Michael Nori was completely stealing the film from Kyle. And then when I cut the film together, it was clearly Kyle. There was just so much going on, and I remember at one point, I mean, usually I don't talk to actors about like what they're doing, you know, how they're doing what they're doing. I figure that's their secret, that's their business.
Yeah.
And I don't want to know. But he had said to me that he had studied with some acting teacher, and the acting teacher talked about having a mask on, and that there were all these emotions, but there was a mask in front of it. You know, and somehow the emotions would come through that mask, but you know, you don't want to go, you know, you don't want to play those emotions. You want to mask them and then have them come out, and that's exactly what he did. I mean, he's really one of the best actors that I work with. You know, and I've worked with some really good ones, but I thought the performance he gave was so touching.
It was.
And you know, the humor and everything else. I mean, Rory played well off of each other. I mean, they were very well written characters. So it was a question of a really good script, and then I just had a great sense of how to make the movie. I just really knew how to make it, you know.
Yeah. Edo Ross. I always love seeing Edo Ross.
Yeah.
Something about he's got that great look. That great look. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Ed was a little bit of a cowboy. I mean, he initially, I kind of had a hard time with him. He didn't really want to listen to me.
Yeah.
I mean, not in a bad way, but he would just kind of be like doing his own thing. Like we were shooting in Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills is not a nice place to shoot because you shoot in LA and there are these cops and they have like these syndicates. So you hire this one syndicate and you know, and there's a guy like a head cop, and they hire these off-duty cops or these retired cops. They have their own motorcycles, and they work with you. You know, they have to follow all the rules, but you know, they're only allowed to hold traffic for 2 minutes, but they'll hold traffic for an extra minute, so you can do one more. You know, you can go around the block one more time and stuff like that. Beverly Hills, the cops work for the city, so when you're shooting, you know, they're not getting anything extra. You know, you're like a pain in the ass for them, and they're a bunch of fucking assholes. and so we did the scene where right in the beginning they're interviewing this guy. She said, I don't know, he was my neighbor. He was a real nice guy. I don't know, you know, what did he do? Rob a bank? And they said, quick, we got to go. And they run in the car and they jump in the car. And Edo Ross is driving, and he floors it, lays down rubber, it takes off. So the assistant director comes up to me and says, listen, the cop in charge just said, if he lays down rubber, if you do another take and he lays down rubber, he's going to shut us down. So I go to Ed and I say, Ed, don't floor it when you just drive off normally. Do not floor it. So we do another take, and he does it normally. And then I do one more take. He jumps in the car and he floors the gas pedal and he lays down rubber, takes off. And the cop shut us down. Fortunately, it was the last shot of the day. Yeah. And it was take 3. So we were okay, but he shut us down. Oof. And Ed actually went to court to challenge. Oh, and he gave Edo Ross a ticket. And he also had the production manager came to visit us on the set, and he parked illegally. And the cop had his car towed. The guy who was paying, writing the checks, his car towed. So Ed actually went to traffic court to fight it, and the judge threw it out.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's a plus to it.
A funny story was what?
Well, I was going to say one of my favorite things about the movie The Hidden was the fact that the daughter was the only one that could really tell something was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was my major addition to the script, was that Nuri and his wife just kind of had this kind of breezy kind of relationship where they kind of joked around a lot.
Yeah.
And I felt it was really important for them to have a good, strong relationship where you could see that they loved each other, so that Kyle's character could connect to that,
Yeah.
and that's what he had back home, you know. And I'm not sure whether it was in the script that the bad alien had killed his family.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was in there or not. Probably was.
That's
But I felt that if here's a family, so I thought, well, I can't spend much time creating a relationship between Nuri and his wife because it's not that kind of movie. So there's that one scene where Kyle comes and visits them in their house. And I said, how can I do this quickly? And I thought, let me give him a child. And then if Kyle had a child that was killed by the alien, then he can connect to that.
Right.
And then also, you know, if there's a child, there's you know, normally a lot of love, you know.
Yeah.
And so I put her in, and then I thought that it would be good if, because she's innocent and doesn't have any preconceptions about anything, that she can see, you know, as we get clouded up from all the shit that happens to us in our lives,
Right.
you know, we don't see things, but that she has a kind of a purity that she can see this stuff.
At the ending where his partner, his now new friend who has died because of everything that has happened, the decision that he takes to, you know, go from himself into his now deceased partner to try to keep and kind of keep that family unit that he has now kind of bonded with, I thought was a superb and perfect ending, which in my mind elevated the film, which I already liked, but really made it, in my opinion, something more than just, you know, you can try to chop it off to as just a sci-fi movie or a sci-fi cop movie, but that ending, in my opinion, raised it to even to another level.
Right. Well, that was my ending. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what interests me, is those kinds of things. Like, I mean, listen, you know, it's really fun to do car chases and action and all of that kind of stuff. You know, and yeah, I am good at it. You know, a lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, that I'm an editor.
Yeah.
You know, and then I did all these trailers for a lot of action movies, so I kind of know how it works. And I mean, whatever you may think of my movies, they all move along. They're not like, you know, I hear about these directors, you know, and they have a 120-page script and they have a 3.5-hour first cut, and it's like, I have a 110-page script and I have a 100-minute first cut, you know.
Yeah.
Then I have to try to like make it longer so it doesn't end up as, you know, 85 minutes, because I just keep everything moving, you know.
Well, I think one of the big benefits, I mean, I myself, not to your level, but I've started editing a lot of projects, and I think that kind of the editing mind really helps, especially. I mean, I think a lot that really elevates that film is the fact that you show a lot without. I mean, there's movies where you have someone who just sits down and talks about, well, this is the history of my planet. This is, you know, all, you know, really go on and expound upon, you know, this and that. But with your films, I find that you say a lot in the visuals, in the expressions, in the shots. So that's, I mean, so you're able to, you know, do like 100-minute film because you know how to simplify and get to the core of the story in less shots that someone who might not be an editor, who's filming a film, might end up taking the same amount of pages and doing like a 3-hour film.
He kind of knows what's going to be on the cutting room floor
Yeah.
before you get to the cutting room floor. you know?
Which I think is exceptional, and what I really kind of connect to when I watch your films.
Yeah, well, my films are very much an editor's films. You know, I mean, if Ridley Scott is really a production designer, you know,
Yeah.
at heart, or a cinematographer at heart, and other people are actors at heart, and they get great performances. I'm really an editor at heart. I mean, when I'm shooting, I'm just sort of editing the movie in my head. I mean, I'm not trying to, but it just, I can just see, well, I know I'm going to cut here. So I've already got this first half of the scene good. So I only need to get the second half, because I know I'm going to have to cut somewhere here. So let's do another take, and we're going to do the whole thing, but I'm really concerned with this part here, so that's helpful. So, I can be more economical, but also, a screenwriter friend of mine, he talks about dialogue. He says dialogue should be like the CIA. It should be like only on a need to know basis.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing.
And Hitchcock also said, he said, bad directors show people talking, good directors show people thinking.
I like that.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, I've seen a lot of films, especially more with more modern directors, where there's a scene where you could simply cut out like half the scene and do it in just visuals, but you have someone drone on explaining things which you can just show. And I mean, films are a visual medium, so I mean, dialogue is very important, but like you said, I mean, I think the CIA comment is extremely a good way of looking at it, especially if you're making a film, that they should only say what you really the mere necessity of what you need for the scene, and show the rest.
Sure.
Yeah, well, having worked, with a lot of studios and networks and stuff like that, in the script stage, they always want to have you explain everything.
Yeah.
There's always like, well, how are they going to know? How are they going to, got to put this in. We got to explain all this stuff. And then when you get into the movie and you start to edit it, you realize that you don't need to explain it. It's like, gee, the guy's like brushing his teeth, and now he's in his car. How did he get to his car?
Right.
Well, obviously, we don't need to know that. Who gives a shit? We're only concerned he's in his car now.
Yeah.
So it's like, we don't need to say, well, after I brushed my teeth, I had breakfast, and like, who cares?
Yeah. I mean, you don't need to show him going to the bathroom, right?
Yeah, and I wrote and directed my first feature, Alone in the Dark. And so when you're writing these scenes, you tend to write the scene with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yeah. And then when you get into the editing room, or at least when I get into the editing room, what would happen after a while is like the movie like goes, and stops, and then it starts, goes, stop, start. So if you cut the beginnings and the endings off, sometimes it just goes. And so you don't have to explain any further. Have you seen? There's a TV show, a limited series on Netflix called The Chair. Have you seen that one? It takes place. It's really good. It's only like 6.5 hours, but it's about this woman who becomes the chair of the English department in this small university, and like the best teacher in the English department accidentally, he's giving a lecture, and he gives the Hitler sign.
Oh, jeez.
And students who were filming the lecture, they put it out on a meme, and suddenly, like, it's like everybody like wants to get him kicked out, and there's a whole big thing. But the woman who's played by Sandra Oh, she has a daughter who's pretty eccentric, and she takes her daughter to see a psychiatrist, and she's like, spending most of the time talking about how horrible her job is, and the psychiatrist says, we spent a lot of time talking about you, but we're really here to talk about your daughter. And she looks at the little girl. She's on the floor playing, and she says, so what are you doing? And she said, and the little girl says, well, I'm making something. Would you like some? And the psychiatrist says, sure, what is it? The little girl says, it's poison. And then it just cuts to the next scene, just like immediately. Like, it doesn't cut back to her for a reaction shot. It just boom. And it's so much funnier.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to see the reaction,
Yeah.
It's just boom.
The punchline.
Yeah. It's like, sometimes you see a film and it kind of ends like 3 times.
Yes.
Did you ever see those
Yes.
films? Yeah, I mean, economy.
Yeah. We just want to ask one last quick question. We ask about the guest. We get a lot of filmmakers, actors, artists of all types that listen and watch the show. Do you have any words of advice for them? We know the business gets discouraging. You have ups and downs. Do you have any advice for anybody that, they're in a down right now, but ups will be right around the corner type deal?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you stick with it, you'll have some kind of success. It can be very discouraging. I mean, I was kind of, I talk to people about, what I've done. You guys are probably looking at me saying, wow, this guy had such a great, successful life. I mean, I never felt I was successful. I was always like scrambling. I mean, there were periods when things were going pretty well, but honestly, most of the time, I never felt I was successful. I felt I was struggling. I felt other people were doing better than me. I thought, all of that. But it just never. I guess maybe I was dumb. It just never occurred to me that I wouldn't be able to do this. So I just stuck with it. I mean, there was one point when I was living in New York, and I would get some editing work, and I have some money, and then I wouldn't get work, and the money would start to disappear. And at one point, I figured, well, I could always drive a cab. Worst came to worse. And I got to the point where it was like, I have no more money. I got to get some kind of money, or I can't pay my rent, can't pay my electric bill, and I actually went to apply for a job to drive a cab, and that day I got a call for some work. So I think I have a friendly angel who's been watching over me. But if you and having taught, because I taught for 13 or 14 years. I've seen my students, and the ones that were determined are all making a living. It may have taken them a little while, but they're making a living. If you're determined, if you can get along with people, and if you're willing to work hard, you just got to stick with it. It's kind of like there's this huge, Temple of Doom, giant stone door that weighs like 3 tons. And every day you get up and you push on the door and it doesn't budge. But you just got to every day get up and push. And one day the door just cracks open a quarter of an inch. And then the next day you get back and you push, and then eventually, it creaks open. So, and you know, when I was making movies, and hopefully I still am. I got a movie that hopefully is going to go later this year, God willing. But it was very hard to make a movie. You needed a lot of money. You had to buy film. You had to get rid of all this. Now you can make a film on your phone. You know, in a way, it kind of makes it too easy.
Mm.
You know, you got to have a good script. If you don't have a good script, there's no way you can make a good movie. Got to have a good script. But if you got that, then just do it. You know, just go and do it. You can make a movie on your phone, and if it's a good movie and people are moved by it, it's all about emotion. You know, that's you know, all of us that love film. If you think about the films that you love, you think about the emotion you had when you were watching them. You know, you're either laughing or you're tense or you're, you know, sad or, you know, you're moved or whatever. And that's what it's all about. That's why people love art. That's what it does for you, you know. And so that's really what you want to do, you know, is find that emotion. Work for that, whatever that emotion is, whether it's terror, whether it's, you know, funny, whatever. So that's my advice.
I dig it. Very good advice.
Stick with it.
Hell
Stick
yeah.
with it. I'm living proof that you don't have to be the most talented person in the world. You know, if there was a contest on TV when I was younger, you know, I definitely would not have won it. But you know, I just persisted.
Yeah. Persistence is key.
Yeah.
Well, Jack, we thank you very much for coming on, man. We took up a whole bunch of your time. This was
Yeah.
great. We really appreciate you coming on, talking. We're big fans of your work, and to be able to sit down, talk some shop, discuss some things with you is a beautiful thing. We really appreciate you giving us your time.
I hope as an editor you're going to cut this down.
Well, he'll do
It's
some-
way,
a little bit
it's
of time.
way too long. And one more piece of advice
Yeah.
to your budding: the secret to creativity: avoid the obvious.
True.
Except sometimes the obvious is the way to go. And I guess understanding when to avoid it and when to go with it is where genius comes in. So
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
try to avoid the obvious for starters.
We
All
will
right, guys.
try that.
It was great talking to you.
You too, Jack. Thank you. Have a great day. And we'll have you on the show again sometime. We could go another 2 hours on the rest of your career.
Probably, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay,
So-
well, if I get to do this movie later on, we should talk about it.
We are all for that. We are all for
Okay.
that.
All right. Well, take
right,
care,
Jack.
guys. Have a good Sunday.
You too. Have a
Bye-bye.
good one. Well, that was a lot of fun. That was a great interview with Jack, and we hope to have him back in the future. You know, that was killing it. That was fucking awesome times. Great dude. We support everything that Jack does, and you should too. And with that being said, we hope everybody enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch y'all on the next one. If you like this episode, this show, you probably check out the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. You can catch the BoomBastiCAST podcast. That show, we have a whole array of all types of flavored episodes, multiple flavored episodes on there. And right here on the Boombastic Media YouTube page is where you always catch our good old BoomBastiCAST interviews. And there's a whole smorgasbord out there if you want to get some more BoomBastiCAST in your blood. It's the only thing that'll get you through these tough times is a little BoomBastiCAST in your blood. So pop it out there. If you want to pay for the prescription, of course, you go to the Boombastic streaming page on Patreon, where you get your medication prescription filled once a week with multiple cool things of new episodes before they hatched upon the public, as well as all types of specialty things, you know what I mean? So check it out if you want to go there. But if you don't want to take a trip down that road, you always have the audio podcasts on the platform networks, and you got your video cast from the BoomBastiCAST boys right here. And we'll catch y'all on the next episode of the BoomBastiCAST. Peace.